Hello and welcome to The Wise Why. Now, in theory, being that I'm married to a Dutchman, I should be really good at pronouncing Stef's surname, but I'm not, because Dutch surnames are not easy. So, as usual, The Wise Why is about my guest. So I'm going to introduce you to Stef van Boekel, I hope.
Yes, good enough for me.
Who has got a fascinating, incredible journey and some brilliant advice to share with you today. So, enough about me. If you're looking to launch on Amazon, this is a podcast you don't want to miss. Over to you, Stef.
Oh, thanks for having me, Kirsty, and thank you also for the nice words. Indeed, I'm hoping we're able to bring some interesting insights towards your audience, and yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So, can you explain a little bit, because you tackle a part of the market that people find overwhelming? And I know this because when I worked at D-Link, I can remember Adrian Edwards and Katie Leon sitting for days and days and days trying to upload all of the information for the My D-Link cloud launch, which was one of the first home CCTV cameras. Can you explain how complicated it really is to get your products out into Europe?
Well, if you want to start reaching a consumer in a country, they are expecting a local experience. And I think that is the complexity of it all. If you want to start selling across border, you need to understand the local market, which obviously you don't if you don't live in that country. And that has on a different levels. So from compliance perspective, taxes, culture, language, currency, taxes, and I think that whole scope of it all that makes it quite a complex activity. Also, one of the main reasons why the majority of the companies only sell in one or in two countries, or for example, they work with a local distributor that understands the market.
So I've done the distribution route. You know, when I worked at D-Link, when I worked at Samsung, we worked at Hanwha, we all sold through distributors because it made life easier. But if you're a sole trader, a small market owner, going to a large distributor doesn't always work. Have you got any advice you can share with people?
Well, actually, the distributor model in general is an old model because more and more companies are setting up solutions to start selling cross-border. And for example, a very typical example is if you want to work in Europe, nowadays you can go to DHL and say, I want to have a logistical contract for all Europe. That was 10 years ago, that was not possible. So you needed to have a local player that worked with the local logistical companies. What's the impact then is that a manufacturer is able to then sell directly to the local players, and the margin in between is basically the competitive advantage of the distributors that versus the distribution model. So the distribution model in general is a not, let's say, a very long-term solution, I believe. And so I don't think a company is doing well to really focus solely on a distribution only strategy. To go back to your main question, what if you are a small player? Actually, if you are a small player, a distributor can be the shortest way to start gathering, let's say, to get some foothold in a new country. But you definitely need to have something to offer towards the distributor, because if you're one out of 100 brands that they distribute, you want to make sure that their sales team is going to focus on your product. So you need to be well prepared with a good catalog, with good promotion material, marketing budget, etc. Otherwise, you're able to distribute, but the distributor will not target your brand.
And that was my role. That's what I very rarely talk about because it doesn't seem necessarily relevant to what I do now. But of course, that's what I did. I ran the distribution channel for these companies. I was out there and I was there running these sales incentive days, and I can't say that I was exhausted because I wasn't young. I was in my 40s, and I was having to come up and jeer these sales teams and keep them going and focus them and find ways to drop my price and create margin. And that's the beautiful nugget here. I was talking to somebody yesterday about the cost of goods. Don't know if you want to expand a little bit about margin and the cost of goods.
So if you look at the whole chain, let's say, if you look at what in my experience, how it normally looks like, is that a retailer has approximately, depending on product category, obviously that's really important to say that product category really varies, but let's say on average it's 30 to 35%. For that activity, the retailer has the complete consumer operation setup. So they sell single items to provide high customer support. People can return. There's a showcase. That's a web shop, or that is, for example, a store where they can go to. Then you have the distributor. The distributor often works against 20%. For that, they keep storage in their warehouse. They buy in pallet level from the manufacturer, and they sell often in master packs towards the retailer. They build up the relationships with the different local retailers, and for that they earn approximately 20%. Then you go back to the manufacturer, and on an average, we can say the manufacturer, after selling it to the distributor, still has another 50% on margin for the production, the marketing activities, the brand development, research and development in general. So they have the biggest cake, sort of, but also by far the biggest responsibility.
So how do you help somebody? Because, you know, it's quite complex, and there's not, when you start taking away 20% for a distributor, 40 up to about 40% for a retailer, that's 60% of your business, and that's before you look at your costs, right? That's your cost of manufacturing. So what do you do that helps somebody that, I don't sell product, but somebody who's selling product, or, because I saw on your website you've got some really cool products that are out there on Amazon. So what do you do?
So to give a little bit background about myself, so what I did for almost 50 years, and I was helping companies to set up an infrastructure so they can supply to the consumer on a European level, with giving the local experience, so that the client from Denmark or from Spain or from the UK was thinking he's buying something locally, but it was actually managed. So I was looking at the warehouse management system, the logistical network, the customer support, which language do they speak, are they able to reply in 24 hours, etc. And then you realize that everybody is understanding the direct-to-consumer strategy is the strategy for the long term. But if you come from a traditional company, that then it's quite a big culture change to recognize that you need to have a high customer experience, because online, let's say the end consumer is expecting a very high experience. They want to have the product delivered next day. They want to pick it up at the local post office, return it at the local post office, have customer support in the same language that replies within 24 hours, etc. And if you need to change a company saying, okay, you've been shipping pallets, as a, for example, manufacturer, you've been shipping pallets worth of 5,000 euro, and then explain them that order of 50 euro is just as important as the order of 5,000 euro, that's a big culture change, mostly. Also procedures and systems, etc. So what I did is I was working inside companies where everybody says, yes, e-commerce is the future and we want to change. But at the end, you see that it was not really optimized, let's say, the sales. The sales had a lot more potential, but because of the already existing setup, is quite complex, specifically if you want to do it on an international level. So yeah, long story short, what I do, instead of going from project to project to project, I designed the whole infrastructure from zero, and now I offer it as a service. So we say to companies, for the price of a half FTE, you get 30 FTE that are busy with making sure that the consumer in those countries get a local experience.
Yes.
What does
Brilliant.
that basically mean? The manufacturer ships the stock to us, and we make sure that the products are visible on Amazon, but also all other major marketplaces in Europe. We make sure that the consumer in those countries has, like I said, the local experience. So basically, you're able to immediately distribute your products on a pan-European level, as well on a professional level.
Brilliant. So let's address the elephant in the room, because unfortunately there was a thing that happened and it changed the way the UK can trade. So we have to address the Brexit conversation, and we have to address the impact of that, because there has been a challenge for people to get, for me to send something to my in-laws, for instance, I send it to them in Rotterdam, and they have to pay £25 to get it released from customs, and it's not even worth that. So we can't ship as family presents to each other. We now have to work out, actually we send a lot of gift vouchers, but I wonder if we could address a little bit about the elephant in the room of Brexit.
Yeah, I mean, Brexit from an international trade perspective was not a very smart move. So yeah, we work with a lot of UK companies that were used to sell a lot in Europe, and then basically went from 100 to 0, from 100 to 20. We as a company act as import of record. So then basically just ship to one warehouse, they invoice to one warehouse, and we take care of all the customs and all the local setup. So on this way we solved it. So for us it gave an opportunity, but for UK companies, well, actually UK, because I've been in the international trade on the European level for many years now, I always found UK the most competitive market. I find that in the UK, there are very strong traders, much stronger than in the majority of the. Basically, if you look at UK and Europe, I think UK has the best traders of that region for sure, by far. I think because it is an island. So I think from years ago, you already had, let's say, the experience with trading. So from that perspective, it's always difficult to do business there from a margin perspective, because there's a lot more negotiation going on. So that is now still active, basically, because I was expecting that it would be doing business like with Norway and Switzerland, but it's still messy at the border. And I'm hoping that the problems will be solved soon, and that procedures are going to be a lot more smoother to help basically both parties. On, let's say, each side help both parties.
Thank you for sharing that, because I don't think we talked about Brexit, and there's a whatever the split was. I know it's like a couple of percentage. I'm not going to try and pull that up on air when I'm live, but I know that there was a real big divide in the country, but I don't think any of us really thought about the long-term impact, and we are still suffering with it. So we can't not have somebody who solves the problem and how to ship your goods to Europe on the podcast without actually addressing it. So thank you. So I want to hear a bit about the man behind the brand, the man who you are, because you live in Tuscany, you're a father. So I wonder if you could just tell me more about you.
Okay. Born and raised in the Netherlands, grew up at a farm. So basically, I started working when I was maybe 10 years old. So I've always been working, always. Let's say from the age of 12, I was always having jobs. So I think that really had an impact growing up on a farm on my, let's say, my work ethics. Studied international trade. That's also quite a common thing in the Netherlands. Like the people from the UK, we have a, let's say, a long history when it comes to international trade. Been now indeed already for 17 years together with my wife. I'm 40, so for a very long period of, if you look at my total life. Indeed, father of 3, and I lived and worked basically in almost any country in Europe, but also outside Europe. I lived in 5, and now I live in Italy. And why do I live in Italy? Is because I like to drink wine during lunch. That's one of the reasons. And the second reason is I lived in Italy before, like 10 years ago, when I really liked it. And when the company was developing and I need to attract people from all over Europe, do that when you're in the Netherlands in a city like Amsterdam, but I didn't want to live in Amsterdam or another big city. So then I was actually reading a startup story of a company that had the same issue to attract international staff in a quite quick pace. And then they moved to Barcelona and they said, come live and work in Barcelona. And then immediately there was no issue, because everybody, specifically nowadays, the young professionals like to have, let's say, some flexibility about traveling, etc. So I thought, hey, why not? Why don't I also, develop the business in Barcelona? So I actually travel to Barcelona, look for houses and offices, and then I was then thinking, if it's Barcelona, it can also be something else. And after my pleasant experience in Italy years ago, I thought, yeah, why not Tuscany? So my wife always wanted to live in Italy. So the decision was made, and that was 5 years ago. Now we've been living we went there with a pregnant wife and one son, and now we have 3 sons and already living, for 5 years. Yeah.
I love it. And I just want to touch on the work ethic a little bit, because I find that that's quite culturally, obviously I'm married to a Dutchman, and I find that's quite a cultural thing in Holland, is the work ethic. He started working, he'd kill me if I tell you the story, but hey, he never watches the podcast anyway, so I'm going to. He started working at 14 in a bumblebee factory. I won't tell you the other bit of the story that will still keep in my head and make me giggle. But he started doing that because he wanted a TV, and his parents said, so he's a little bit older than you, but not much. And his parents said, if you want a TV, you've got to go out and work and earn it. So I think he was about 11 or 12, not much older than you're saying you were. And he was working in a bumblebee factory, folding cardboard. And then he actually started putting bumblebees out for the shipping to the farm. So you probably received some of the bumblebees to pollinate your vegetables on your farm, if you were just selling vegetables, that was sent from the bumblebee factory that my husband worked at.
That's a funny story indeed.
I shouldn't laugh, but I do see, I look at my in-laws, I look at Nettie and I look at Pete, and Pete was out working from, a bit like my parents, a generation thing, working from a really young age, and started working on the tools, the same as my husband. He started working on the boats offshore. So I just find the cultural work ethic in Holland really fascinating. I have it because I'm of a generation where you could start working at 13, but it was just something I really wanted to touch on because it really resonates with me that you seem to have a very strong work ethic as a country.
Yeah, I think now, because I've been working and living in multiple countries, I can definitely confirm what you're saying. If I go to family, it's probably the second question: how is work? Right. So you talk a lot with friends and family how things are going at work. Are you happy? What are you learning? What are you doing? How does the market look like? Right. You really want to understand how that business operates where people work. Well, for example, in Italy, it's I know people for a year, and I would like to talk about work, but they don't. They don't talk about work. I have no idea what kind of job they do, and they don't like to discuss it because work is not of an importance. Food is, which obviously is also a nice subject. So yeah, it's true. It's a very cultural thing. Work is a very important thing in the Netherlands when it comes to happiness, right? So also, if you're not happy at work, everybody says change job. If you're not happy, change job, make a change, and a lot is work related.
And the reason I run the business is because I wasn't happy, and Nettie and Pete went, change it. And I remember the conversation. And when I was launching, I was like, oh, I'm never going to make it. It's really difficult. They were like, nope, you just keep working at it. There was something else I was going to ask about the Netherlands, but it's gone. So I'll come back to that. But inspiration. You talked about your wife, you're living in Tuscany, you've got 3 children. I know what I was going to talk about because I've just brought it back in. Parenting. Dutch children are apparently the happiest children in the world, apparently, to do with Dutch parenting. I don't know.
Okay.
I will go. I don't know if we can discuss that, but apparently there is a statistic that says that Dutch parenting is the best.
Okay. Well, obviously for me, difficult to judge. But what I really think is a big difference. But I think in the UK it's similar. But here in Italy, for example, it's not. We bring kids to bed at 7 o'clock. That's the time everybody goes to bed. So let's say until you're 8 or something like that, you go to bed at 7 o'clock. While here in Italy, it could be 10 or 11. And they always say to me, how is that possible? And I said, but how is it possible to put them in bed at 10? You first of all, you want to have your own private evening. And secondly, if my kids don't sleep 10 hours, the next day they're not, it's not that fun.
I'm with you. I've got a 7-year-old, and trust me, she's just asked for her bedtime to go to 7:30, and we're crying. I'm going to be honest, we're crying because that means actually that she's asleep by 8:15 if we're lucky, and it's like, no, we have to go to bed by 9 because we're exhausted. Anyway, so inspiration. We've talked about your children. I'm wondering who's inspired you.
I think my if I look at to prove myself, I would think it's still towards my parents. Even though I'm 40, as somehow I think that's a big driver still to show that you are able to get some things done. And that's basically the fundament. And I think over the years you have different people that you work with, but of course also be friends that sort of you want to level up with, or you want to prove yourself to. So that's basically how I get inspired. What I really like to do is I don't like social media that much, but if I follow people on social media, those are often some entrepreneurs that I look at. And I think that also helps me when I'm doing that. I think they call it Zoom zombie scrolling or something like that. That at least there are people that are doing some stuff or being in a position that I also want to be. So that's a bit how I look at if I look towards persons, that's how I look at my inspiration.
Awesome. And have there any been moments in your life where you've felt that you've had to? I mean, you've changed jobs, you've moved, you've done pivots. But I'm just wondering if there's any moments where you've had really, really great decisions, or those decisions where you think, I wish I hadn't done that. So those aha moments.
I think it's not per se decisions. It's more about getting out of a situation that was horrible, then recognizing it was the best experience in my life. That for me always surprises me, how it changes your behavior and your view on life and in business when basically, specifically, the wrong things happen.
Yeah. I was talking to someone yesterday about that. Sometimes you could be in a job and you just can't see what is going on around you. And when you're in a company, sometimes the power plays, you're being used, and it's not all business, but sometimes you feel like something's going on, but you can't see what it is, but you're unhappy. And sometimes you have to take that leap of faith and jump on that surfboard and just see where you land. So I'm going to ask a question which I don't normally ask, but if you
I
could,
think I want to add something to it,
yeah,
because if I then look back, I think your stomach feeling is very important. Your intuition is really important. So because it's quite easy sometimes to just keep on going, hope that things change. But if you're unhappy, I do think you need to make big cuts, and then you will realize that you will quite quickly get back on your feet. So I can always definitely confirm and also stimulate people, make decisions, big decisions, keep making on big decisions. It's not going to harm you. And looking back on the long term, it were those decisions that really brought you further in life.
that's really good advice. I was told when I was learning to doing my singing when I was with Niven Miller. He was my singing teacher at the time, and he taught me that if your heart and your head agree, then it's a right decision. If your heart is saying one thing and your head is saying the other, really listen to both, but probably go to your gut. It was
Yeah,
really
all my bad decisions were basically by not listening to my gut feeling.
And there is that moment. It's everything I do, everything that I've done since I launched this, KVDB, has been gut, 100%. Someone said to me, "You're so brave," and it's like, no, I kind of just go, let's give it a whirl. You inspired me this morning to write a blog. There were things that happen in my life where I go, yeah, that's a really good thing, but it's that guttural feeling where I go, that's the right thing. Same as launching the podcast. It was a gut thing. But I also have to act on my gut super quickly, because if I don't act on it, it's gone. I don't know if you have the same thing.
I tend to stimulate myself to always immediately take action, because otherwise I know it's gonna fade away or come back 3 weeks later, and then I'm just annoyed with myself that it didn't start that 3 weeks ago. So yeah, I definitely can. I have the same way for sure.
And I love that. So I'm going to ask you a question I said earlier that I don't normally ask, which is, what would you say to your 20-year-old self now?
Good question. Yeah, buy real estate. No, what I would say is, one, listen more to your gut feeling. Surround yourself with people that are further in life, and that's basically the main things I would think gonna positively impact.
If I'd listened to my gut, I would have saved myself 12 years of pain. So I'm with you on that one. Really, really good advice there. This is where the tables turn, and I get to worry a little bit because I don't know what the question is. You get to throw a question at me, which I have no idea. So fill your boots, and I will try to be in the hot seat for 2 minutes.
Yeah, looking at your experience, I would like to know if you would be in our position, in, let's say, working on an international level, finding your relations and building also up that relations. How are you able to, let's say, get people motivated to keep working with you on the long term and really see you as a partner?
Really, really good question, and it is an interesting one because when I look at how I go to market, a lot of the time I'm going to market and I end up talking about public speaking or camera confidence because that seems to be the emotive pain that most of my customers have. But actually, what I really do is I look at everything that you say and I put it all the way through, and I'm looking at even potentially creating reports that will go to Europe, like dissemination, exploitation, communication strategies. So it's a lot more than I actually put out there. And so once people start to unveil, it's a bit like an onion. It's like that. If you think of an onion layer, you start with the outside. So the shiny, nice red onion that it's healthy and it's good, and you want to be like that onion. You want to use that onion because it's not got any rot on it, and you're going to make it a really nice bit of food. But as you start to peel it away, you might find another shoot of an onion and another shoot, and you might find more. And as you're uncovering it, you find out what I really do, and you start to discover the strategy. And then you find out that I ran distribution channels, and you realize that I can do multiple. I can run a big project with multiple partners, and you go, I didn't know about that. Can you do this? And it's like, yes, I can do that. And so once you uncover what I actually do, you're ending up working with me for a very long time. So usually a 3-year investment, because I will do every single bit of communication from the report that you're going to submit to Europe, the strategy and the running of the project, right the way down to how you were going to stand in the room and present that information to someone. At the same time, I will also get nervous if I've got to go and present data, and I will struggle, and I might talk too fast, and I might make the same mistakes that you're going to make, because I'm human. And the big thing about it is I'm really human. So I'm not just a on-camera public speaking coach. I'm not just a marketing strategist. I'm actually a communication and brand strategist. And you want me in your company because I'm going to make sure that you rock on every single screen. And it's as simple as that. How was that? I'm not sure. I might steal that as my pitch now. That was actually I might cut that out and put that on my YouTube channel.
You should indeed.
Thank you for asking. Oh, thank you so much for asking me that question. As I said, I had no idea, and I didn't know the onion was going to come in. Thank you for your time this morning. I've really appreciated you sharing your wisdom this morning.
Good. Thank you very much for having me, Christian. I hope to do it sometime again in the future. And it was really nice to be here. Thank you.
No problem.